So where did you first meet?
On the Baltic beach. Didn't we?
On the Baltic beach, yes.
One summer.
1948.
1947?
1947, correct.
1947, on the Baltic beach. It was very romantic.
Which town?
Which town? Oh,
Travemünde.
on the beach, yeah, Travemünde.
Travemünde is the nearest town.
What were you both doing there?
What were we doing?
I should have been working, but I took the day off.
And he's regretted it ever since. And I was his friends playing ball, and the ball rolled into his direction, and he threw it back. That's how it all happened.
And tried to indulge in conversation.
Yes, he spoke German, and I let him as well, because I didn't know what nationality he was, because he was wearing his bathing pants. You can't tell from that, you see, no uniform. I just knew he was some sort of foreigner, never having met an Irishman before.
I never wanted to meet one again.
I didn't know what they sounded like, especially when they were speaking German, sort of German, right?
Correct.
And that was the beginning of the end. Isn't that enough? What a philosophy.
No.
Yes, we have. Yes, look at that. Is that machine going?
Yes, it is.
What do you mean, the filming thing as well?
Yeah.
All the time?
That's
Oh,
right.
the wasp is behind you. This is terrible.
Don't leave it alone, it might go away.
Oh! You can't.
I'm allergic to these bloody things.
Yes. Once he was stung, and I happened to be in Germany, and his arm swelled up. So was it your leg? Which?
First time it was my leg. And the second time it was my arm. And I had to go to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning for injection.
Drive himself
With one hand.
He told me all that sorry tale. Every time I left him, something terrible befell him.
Not terrible.
Well, almost. Almost terrible. Near disaster struck.
So when did you get married?
When did we get married? We got married in 48.
On the 27th of September.
At last he remembers. It took him 30 years to remember the date.
Where was that?
We got married in Blankenese, a lovely suburb of Hamburg, by the River Elbe. And there's a very nice little church. We had a sumptuous reception in the Atlantic Hotel.
And we spent our honeymoon in the Atlantic Hotel.
And we spent our honeymoon in the Atlantic Hotel, a lovely suite overlooking the outer Alster, as they call it, the Außenalster, watching all the sailing boats. We had a balcony and everything, but it was only because of the Control Commission. We couldn't have afforded it otherwise. The food there was gorgeous, wasn't it?
Very good.
Marvelous. I've never seen such food. They must have been excellent cooks, for breakfast. They had a very nice sort of riverside, well, by the lake. Overlooking the lake was the breakfast room, big glass windows, marvelous. And evening meals dinners were very good, wasn't it? Oh, and the weather was excellent when we got married. It was late September, wasn't it? Beautiful.
The weather was very good.
Very good.
What did you know about Ireland before you married?
Oh, nothing at all. Nothing at all. In fact, I once said in the club,
Was Cromwell an Irishman?
and I brought a house down in there because all the Englishmen fell about, and they said, Johnny, don't you ever take her to Ireland without educating her first. Because they'll eat her, didn't they? It was very what do you call it, very hard to learn all about it.
And what did you know about the Germans before you married her?
Nothing. I was in the army in Italy and Africa. I was never in Germany, apart from travelling through. And before I went to Germany, I hadn't met above 4 German people.
And when he came to Germany, he thought he was going to be knifed in bed or something terrible. He did. You did. You told me you went to the dentist.
Nobody would have dared to do
that
because of my high position.
Might pull out all his teeth in a rage. Of course he did. Didn't you?
No.
Yes.
So where were you born, Mother?
Oh, I was born in Silesia, in Upper Silesia actually. Very nice high plateau in heart of Europe. The mountains went far away, medium-sized mountains, the Silesian mountains, for skiing and lots of sports, winter sports, very cold in the winter, very hot in the summer, so lots of swimming, tennis, cycling, and then skating and skiing, tobogganing in the winter.
Where were you born, Father?
In rural Ireland, in Balleen, in County Kilkenny, Southern Ireland, of farming stock.
Did you live through the Irish Civil War?
Through the Irish Civil War, yes, but I was very young.
You didn't see anything?
I did, so I saw a few ambushes, trees cut then across the road. I've seen that. And I've seen the RUC barracks burning in Gattaball. That's all I've seen of that. And I lived through the economic war in Ireland. When Britain refused to, when De Valera refused to pay the annuities to Britain.
Right.
And Britain in turn imposed very heavy sanctions on imports from Ireland. And free beef was given out. There was an awful lot of beef to eat and no money. And that prevailed until 1936, when Britain could no longer live without the Irish imports. And the question was settled.
What happened when Hitler came to power?
Well, I was really too little, too small to remember, too young, but I remember that there was a lot of excitement and in the streets, fights and Überfallkommando, they call it in German. The police racing around with sort of riot police to contain all these different factions, especially the communists and the Nazis were fighting mostly. And then one day your grandfather came home and said to Mother, that old idiot Hindenburg, he let in, do you know who he made Chancellor? That Hitler. Because father, your grandfather always belonged to the Centre Party, sort of Democrat, Christian Democrats or whatever they were called then. And then things changed, well, very slowly for us, ordinary people. I think for some the change must have been quite violent. If they were communists, they took a lot of them away and to prisons and things like that. But then lots of other good things happened. The unemployment figures dropped. People suddenly, almost everybody was employed and had work, and they built houses outside the town, little settlements. Everybody had their little Siedlungshaus, they used to call it, and a bit of land and a garden or whatever, and they could grow their vegetables and all those sorts of things. Children who were townschildren who went very healthy, were sent out to the country for 5 marks for a very minimum sum for 6 weeks or 4 weeks, all this sort of thing. And the emphasis was on outdoor life and health.
When did you know that there was going to be a war?
Well, in 1938 at school, they suddenly had this training, and they built air raid shelters, and they told us about air raids in schools, and we became very frightened, and about gas masks and all this paraphernalia. So it seemed, from my point of view, very young at school, now and again you got scared, but then you forgot about it because you were playing and you had all the other things.
When were your brothers called up?
Oh, they were called up immediately after matriculation. That was at the end of the war, of course, when one was 17, the other one was 18. But my father was called up, your grandfather was called up in 1939, a week before the war started. He suddenly, and it was a tremendous shock because he was not a young man anymore. He had been, the last year in the First World War, he was a soldier. Had been born in 1899, so he was called up in 1917. And then in 1939 he was 40 years old, and we had a business, and things became very difficult and strenuous for my mother and me. And then, though he came back, he was home for a year in between. I don't know which year it was. I suppose after France fell, he was released. But then he was called up again when the Russian campaign began, and he served in Russia, etc. But luckily, at the end of the war, he was stationed with his regiment in Berlin, and not Russia. And my brothers were both soldiering in the West, one in France and one in Belgium. So they were prisoners of war, all in the West. And we found them eventually, all in one piece. And everybody was in one piece. Can I just go in and get myself some wine?
Well, hang on.
Okay.
So Father, why did you leave Ireland, and what year was it?
I left Ireland in 1936. And I left it not strictly through economical reasons, through a sense of adventure. I was born in an era of an emigration was the thing. And everybody talked of emigrating to America, etc., etc. And emigration to America was already stopped. So I just came to England instead.
Where did you go when you arrived in London?
I went to Liverpool Street for no particular reason. And I asked a policeman where he suggested I should stay, and he asked me how much money I had. And I had 16 shillings. And he said, well, you won't stay in the Ritz for that. I advise you to go to the Salvation Army Hostel, which is just across the road from Liverpool Street Station in Middlesex Street, or what is commonly known as Petticoat Lane. And I stayed there for 3 days.
3 nights?
3 nights and 1 day. I slept.
Presumably.
I slept on the day I arrived. I went to bed and slept. It cost a shilling a night then, for a shilling for a cubicle, and 9pence for the open sleeping.
Did you have a cubicle?
I had a cubicle, one man. And it was very good, and I was very well treated. And ever since, I have had an awful lot of time for the Salvation Army.
Very good.
Did you look for work?
I looked for work the first night. I went into a public house and asked if they needed any employees. And the manager said no. And then as I was leaving, he said, we have a customer here whose father owns a place in Bognor Regis. If you see him, you can ask him for a job. He won't be in tonight, he'll be in tomorrow night. He said, you come in tomorrow night and I'll point him out to you. So I spent the next day sightseeing, and I went back into the White Hart in Feather Lane. I believe it was bombed during the war, I'm not quite sure, I believe it was. And I came back the next night, and he said he hasn't come in yet, and then eventually this party came in, and he pointed this chap out, quite tall, Jewish type. They were bookmakers and at that time partners of Cope's, Penny Points people. And he said, that's Mr. Howes wearing the black hat. And I said, excuse me, sir, I believe you're looking for staff for your hotel on the south coast. And he said, what can you do? And I said, just about everything. And he said, it's not really my hotel, it's my father's. And I don't understand very much about it, but if you come in on Saturday night, I'll drive you down there. And I said, yes, thank you very much. And as I left, he said, come back. He said, what's your name? And I told him. He said, have you got any money? And I said, no, sir. And he gave me 10 shillings, which I thought was very generous. And I spent the next day sightseeing and turned up on the Saturday night.
When did you come to London?
When did I come to London? In 1949, I came to London.
May.
In May 49, yes. Yes, I was very homesick, and I felt very strange, you know, but also very excited to be in London. I remember walking across the bridges over the Thames and all this, and I saw London Bridge and Waterloo Bridge and the Strand. I'm really here. And it was interesting, although, you know, I was upset because I hoped we'd stay in Germany, I suppose, in some way, and I missed the family. But otherwise, it was well, it was hard in being German, and understandably, lots of people felt very bitter about the Germans, but they used to apologize for me. They used to say, never mind, dear, I don't think you're so bad. And sometimes they asked me if I was Dutch or Austrian or Danish or whatever. And I was tempted to say yes. And then one day I thought, no, why should I? I don't have to apologize to anybody for anything. Nobody chooses the place or the time of their birth or their parents. And this was just it. I paid a high price for things that other people had done already by being a refugee and homeless and all that sort of thing. So I didn't see, and actually that was the turning point when I just said, I'm German, what you're going to, in effect, you know, so what you're going to do about it. People treated me with respect. I think from then on. Then I got a job. After 7 years, I started teaching, and of course I met all sorts of people who were interested in Europe, not just little Englanders, you know. So trying to keep anybody from building any connections or the tunnel or anything with Europe. So things became much, much better. And through the boys, I have roots now in this country. I belong. And I feel I justified myself. And I don't have to apologize about anything to anybody. Okay?
Tell me about, why did you join the British Army in the 30s?
Why did I join the British Army in the 30s? I joined the British Army in 1940, actually, April 1940. I joined it because I thought I would find a certain amount of adventure in being a soldier, not for any patriotic reasons. And the situation, of course, was that being Southern Irish, if you'd been in the country 2 years, you either had to go back to Southern Ireland or leave Britain in any case, or be in an exempt occupation. I wasn't in an exempt occupation. I was working in a public house as a barman. And although I'd never been approached, I decided I would register, which I very foolishly did. And
not foolishly, you enjoyed it. I mean,
I enjoyed it, yes. I enjoyed it, yes, but I had no serious reason for doing so. And I just registered and was called up in due course to the artillery in Taunton, Somerset, in April 1940.
Oh dear me, oh dear me. What happened at the end of the war? Well, we were all very scared. We were in North Germany as refugees. Your grandmother and me alone. And we wondered which troops would come in first to overrun us, to occupy the area. And we finished up in some little village near Lübeck, in Mecklenburg actually it's called, that area. And we managed to find some accommodation, and then one day somebody said there are American tanks in the market square of this little town. So we were very scared, and they came through all the houses, armed to the teeth, and real sort of warriors with rough manners, kicking doors in, never using door handles or anything, through the house, kicked their way through, looking, I suppose, for German soldiers hiding under the beds. And while they were passing through, of course, through the house, they took all the valuables lying around. Things that could be stowed away, of course, in their pockets, like watches and jewelry and stuff like that. And a few days after that, they announced that the war was over, capitulation. And then the really hard times began, of course. No food, no administration, for us anyway. That's really it.
Didn't you had to leave because of the Russians?
No, I didn't have to leave. No, not at all. It was the British, after the Americans, the British troops came in and occupied that area. And then your grandmother kept saying, go to the next town, somebody's got to go to Lübeck, to the Red Cross office, in case my two brothers were still alive, looking for us. And so we could, look at the list and put our names down on these lists, search lists they called them. So we managed to, my father was a prisoner of war, was taken outside Berlin in a place called Schwerin, and he was lucky, he was taken by the British and he was a prisoner of war there. But by absolute pure chance and luck, I managed to find, I saw a man from his regiment, an officer, in the market town, in our market square, and he promised to look for him and found him in that enormous camp. And my father, because of his age, was very soon released and came to stay with us in this one room with my mother and me. And then the following Saturday, I thought, well, mother's nagging and I'll go and see the Red Cross people. It was 20 kilometers away, Lübeck, and there's no transport of any kind. So I went on, I walked a bit and then I went, got a lift on the farmer's cart and the rest by tram into the town and had a lovely day in this old Hanseatic town looking at the buildings. Of course, went to see the Red Cross, put our name down on this search list. But in the evening, when I wanted to go back, about 6 o'clock, I arrived outside the town, got off the tram and walked a bit, and there was a barrier and an English soldier, a barrier which hadn't been there at 10 in the morning, and he said, "You can't go any further, miss, the Russians moved in at 12 o'clock lunchtime."
But what about when you left Silesia?
When we left Silesia, the Russians were only a day's ride, well, less than that, I don't know how many kilometers outside our hometown. They were bombing us with low-flying aircraft. Of course, there was no resistance. And you could hear all the shooting at night time, and the sky was red from the artillery, etc. So we were just terrified, sitting there waiting for what's going to happen to us. And my aunt, whose husband was a colonel in a tank regiment somewhere in the middle of Germany, sent a letter by hand to her because there's no postal service anymore. And he implored her to leave. So on her advice and behest, we left with her that one night on the 22nd of January, 45, went to the station and managed to get one of the very last trains leaving that area before the Russians came in. Okay?
Yeah. So, Father, how did you end up in Germany then?
The last 5 months of my military career I spent with the Allied military government in Italy. And on being demobilized, I went to an office for the resettlement of demobilized soldiers, and on hearing that I've been experienced with the Allied military government, they offered me a position with the Control Commission in Germany, which I very happily accepted. And I was a civilian equivalent warrant officer in the Control Commission in Germany for almost 3 years, where I got married and where my eldest son was born. I finished up in Italy, in Udine, in northern Italy. I was demobilized from there, taken by transport to Cali, where I remained for a week, and then to Aldershot, where I was demobilized, given a civilian suit, raincoat and shoes.
Hat. And a hat.
And a pork pie hat, all from a grateful nation.
Actually, it's such a pity that I didn't keep a diary all those years, you know. I could have written a bestseller, I'm sure. Couldn't I?
You still can.
Yes, well, I forget so much. You know,
Yeah, and it's not quite so topical now as it was, say, 20 years ago. Although maybe more so.
10 years ago already. Yeah. Yes, and maybe I should. But if I had kept a diary...
Any further questions?
But I think it would have upset me to read about it now. Wouldn't it you as well?
Not so.
Day by day. You think the army was marvellous, and I think being a refugee wasn't so bad either.
I don't think the army was marvellous.
Yes, you do.
But looking back, you only remember the joyful events.
The good things.
You don't remember the misery of sleeping in wet blankets.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the outdoor life. I still enjoy outdoor life. And army life suited me very well. I like to keep myself clean. I like polishing my boots, which is absolutely amazing.
That's half the battle, isn't it?
And
being able
blanco and my gaiters.
Clean your shoes.
In the army, you have no responsibility. The army is your father and mother that feed you, keep you,
Yes, but tell me,
nurture you.
when you went back to Ireland in a British uniform, was it difficult?
You weren't allowed to go back to Ireland in a British uniform. The procedure was that if you didn't have your own civilian clothing, you went to the Duke of York's barracks in Chelsea, and you handed in your uniform, rifle, etc., if you had a rifle with you, and they in turn supplied you with a civilian suit. The state of the civilian suit depended on how much you dropped the time-expired soldier who was in charge. It was recognised that you saw him, give him 2 half-crowns and said, I'll be back in half an hour, and you got a very good suit. Or you refused on principle to give him anything, and you could very well finish up with +4s.
But what happened when you went to Ireland?
When I went to Ireland, some people whom I knew very well didn't even speak to me. Generally, people were curious, inquisitive about the army experience, and in different parts of Ireland, of course, feeling run high. Some of my relatives were very pro-IRA, nationalistic. They were young and stupid at the time. And they couldn't just understand this. And I explained to them that many Irish people were working in factories on exempt jobs were probably contributing much more to the war effort than I did. And of course, they had relatives serving in the American forces who came to visit them and weren't seeing it all in that light.
But did you explain it as a fight against fascism, or?
Not really. That would be hypocritical. I didn't join the army to fight the fascists. I joined the army for adventure. In fact, I volunteered to fight in Spain in 1937, I think it was. I moved at the time, so they never...
But on which side?
Never found. Oh, with the communists, of course.
But he only joined the army to fight for John Hussey, not for the British Empire or against Adolf. Did you?
True. I
or
thought,
against Mussolini
and,
or pro...
I had a pretty good war. I spent a year in Scotland with an administrative battery. I spent 6 months with the Allied military government.
But when did you first go to Ireland, Mother?
I think when our eldest son was 2 or 3 years old, I think. I felt I had to take him to see his Irish grandmother and his Irish relatives. And I must say I had a marvellous welcome, you know. And he took to it immediately to the life there, and to this day.
But did life in Ireland seem very hard when you went there in the 50s?
But to my eyes,
Yeah.
no, not at all, not at all. Marvelous. In fact, it seemed better in England. In England, there was still rationing, I think, if I remember rightly.
Where were you living in England?
We were living in Chelsea, the back of Peter Jones, a little place there. Now, in Ireland, the food was so marvelous. Beautiful steaks, all first-class beef, and very good milk and eggs and butter, all fresh. No, it didn't seem bad at all. On the contrary.
Living in England in the 50s, did you find it hard to make ends meet?
Yes, I think we did. I did. I had to use all my skill in housekeeping. And I made do, and I mended a lot. Shirts, turned the collars round, and didn't I? I got an old sewing machine, a second-hand one for about £15. A little hand thing. I still got it today, actually. It will.
£5, not 50.
No, I think it was more. Do you think it was £5? Oh,
So
maybe.
what was Chelsea like in the 50s?
Oh, it was marvelous because it was there were lots of foreigners, and I felt at home. And it had a delicatessen shop where sometimes you got sort of continental food, which I missed very much. And it was very interesting as well.
You had to keep house for somebody, didn't you?
Yes. I worked for the flat, for the accommodation we had. I worked every morning, 6 mornings a week, and kept the boiler going. So we lived there rent-free. We were caretakers. Mm-hmm. I was a caretaker. John had a job, of course, for the flat.
But you didn't get on with the people who were living there.
Well, no, they were Empire people. They had both come back from India. I think one or both of them probably grown up there. And they had this odd idea that, like they all did, that anybody who worked for a living was inferior. And, just like they treated people in India. Whereas it annoyed them that somebody was better educated probably than they were, or more intelligent, and just had to do a job like that to get a roof over their heads.
Do you miss Germany?
Oh yes, I miss Germany very much, but I think I miss the family more, and I miss the part of Germany I came from. Well, it wasn't really Germany. It's a disputed country. It belonged to the Silesia belonged to the Austrian Empire until 200 years ago, and there were the Central European influences. The Slavic influence was so strong, and I miss that because North Germany is entirely different, of course. So it was really only the family more than Germany.